For our viewers who are just joining us, just tuning in, we're looking at live images from the scene of what is being called an active shooter situation. This is in Aurora, Illinois. That's about 41 miles outside of Chicago, believed to be at the Henry Pratt Company, a water valve manufacturing company. A source telling CNN that all police command staff left their department for this scene about now, I would say, almost an hour ago since the situation. We first learned of it and were able to confirm that was what was going on here. We're just getting a tweet now from a school district in this neighborhood. This is the West Aurora School District, advising they're going into a soft lockdown. Let me read to you the note that just went out to parents. It says, "Parents, there are reports of an active shooter at the Henry Pratt building near Cleveland and Prairie, just east of Luigi's Pizza. As a result, we are holding all district students in place for their safety. There is a police presence in the area. Per directions from the county sheriff, the district has been advised to go into a soft lockdown situation across the district. Teaching will continue with reduced movement. Normal operations will resume when the soft lockdown has been lifted. No one will be allowed to leave or enter our buildings until that lockdown has been lifted." Again, soft lockdown is what they're calling this. Josh, what exactly is that?
Yeah, so anytime there's an incident like this, we often, will focus on the actual facility in question, and that's what law enforcement is doing, obviously trying to find out where the threat is, and they'll move in that location. But we also have to keep in mind that as you widen the perimeter and the aperture, there are lots of businesses, schools, other facilities that are near, potentially near a active shooter. They also have to take certain precautions because, again, if there's someone that has gone to a particular location to cause harm and then they flee, there are now a potential number of areas where that person can seek shelter. So you see that in these situations, and that's why communication has become so important. And I'll say for CNN's part as well with the media, because getting the word out to these areas that, look, there's a situation that's in your location. This is why law enforcement uses social media. This is why they're trying to get their message amplified, because they want people to know A, what's going on, and then B, how they want them to respond. And we know this is that period of time that's so disconcerting for anyone who may know someone who works here or may live in the vicinity of the area. So law enforcement, businesses, other locations in and around there want to be able to at least give some type of comfort to people that they're responding, that people are actually sheltering in place. And again, until we actually get more details from law enforcement, we won't know exactly what we're dealing with. But this is the evolution, so to speak, of these types of incidents. And I can tell you, when I was inside the FBI, this is one thing that we always try to focus on, is the communication, getting the word out, letting people know where they should go. More importantly, letting them know where places they should avoid as law enforcement does its work. And again, we can't lose sight in this incident. We see this footage. This is a very large facility, and so there's a lot of ground that law enforcement here has to cover. But again, opening the aperture, opening the perimeter in that area, there are a lot of other businesses and schools and other locations, and even residences. We saw a lot of houses that are going to be potentially impacted, and law enforcement wants all of those people obviously to stay out of the way, but then also know to the extent they can what's going on in their vicinity.
And I imagine they're trying to also keep track of people coming and going until they determine whether there could be other people involved in this incident. Let me read you a new notice that just went out from the Aurora Police Department on Twitter. It says, "We have an ongoing active shooter incident." They give the address. They say this is an ongoing active scene at 641 Archer Avenue. We will provide more information once confirmed. So at this point, it sounds like this is still an ongoing situation. Their words doesn't sound like they have anything resolved just yet. We don't know, again, if there are any injuries. None confirmed so far, but we do know there are a number of agencies that are responding, not just law enforcement, but obviously emergency personnel, including Aurora Fire Department vehicles that were seen on scene. And again, we're not knowing about injuries or transports at this time. Let me bring in Brian Stelter here, who I know has been scanning some of the other local media reports out there. What are you hearing? What are you learning?
And the very first indications of something going very wrong at this manufacturing plant were around 1:50 p.m. Central Time, 2:50 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when there were initial indications on social media that something was going on. Whatever call was placed to 911 must have been very disturbing because of the intensity of the response, the numbers of ambulances and fire trucks being rushed to the scene. And look, still in the last 20 minutes here in these images, we are seeing teams of officers moving in toward the building. About 20 minutes ago, we saw a team of officers start to move into the building using vehicles on approach in order to protect themselves, and that is continuing right now. There are different angles here around this building, and the local channels are trying to be careful not to give anything away that could be too troubling.
Josh, what are you seeing here? Describe for us what this could be.
Yeah, so you see officers, at least they appear to be officers there moving very slowly and very methodically. It's hard to tell. Again, we don't know exactly what, if they're returning to some type of location where they're going to meet and corral and, actually, do some type of briefing. There is, and again, this is just speculation at this point, but it have an incident where there's possible evidence that may be located along a certain path. This is the type of that you see from law enforcement. For example, I've been to scenes where you have shootings and often shell casings and any type of evidence, that may have been ejected or may have been discarded. They would often get in these types of formations and walk along a path where a subject may have gone, where a crime may have taken place and occurred. And so it appears just because they're shoulder to shoulder that's probably along the lines of what we're seeing here. And then you have different groups that ensure that nothing is missed or nothing is left behind. But back to, as you mentioned, and as we're saying, reporting right now around about the ongoing active shooter, what we're hearing from the police, the one call that all law enforcement officers want is that all clear that comes out across the radio that says, either the threat is mitigated or there is no threat. And they're not going to send out that call until they are completely 100% sure that there is no threat. So when we see them call this ongoing, it's exactly what it is. We don't have the specifics, whether they've identified a subject, they're in communication with someone, or there's some type of potential standoff. We don't know any of that, but that would all fall under the category of ongoing. And again, officers are going to be very conservative as they describe these types of situations, because their focus again is to determine, is there a threat? And until they've searched every piece of that building, every inch of that building, and actually have that confidence that they can send out that word that there is no threat, this is going to remain ongoing, and we're going to continue to see this police presence. And one thing that's also going to be obviously very important, and Anna, you talked earlier about people that would be coming out of the building, those are all potential witnesses, and so you're going to have this large police presence to interview all of those people, try to figure out what they saw, again, try to hone in on what exactly officers are dealing with, and every one of those people coming out, that's a potential intelligence collection platform to try to determine what's going on inside that building. Bottom line, a lot of work going on right here in this vicinity.
And Josh, we're being careful now about the images that we're showing. Most of these images you've seen here earlier. We don't want to give any information to any potential suspect involved here. We want to be careful for these officers' safety and that of the rest of the neighborhood and people who may be inside that facility, because it is an ongoing situation, as we're learning. But there you see in these pictures, we've seen before, the line of emergency vehicles, the ambulances, fire trucks ready to respond in case there is a medical response that is needed in this situation. We just don't know the answer to that yet. There are no reports or no confirmations right now of injuries or fatalities, but we do know there's an ongoing active shooter situation, according to the local law enforcement there. We're also learning that ATF is responding. So federal officials are responding now to what is reported to be an active shooter situation. Is that standard protocol, Josh?
It is. So we see reports, officers from ATF, from the FBI, essentially any law enforcement officer that's in the vicinity or near a type of shooting is going to respond. You get into the situation where there's mutual aid, where perhaps you'll have additional resources that are needed, but every officer knows that, again, that's the focus, is saving lives, and so they're going to respond to this type of location. And one thing that's really interesting, and I know this having again serving law enforcement, is that there's often this you turn on television, people wonder, okay, well, you see these turf battles between law enforcement agencies, who owns a particular crime, who's in charge. None of that matters right now in these types of situations. They're all working together. You see officers surging to that location, providing whatever resource that they can. And all these agencies not only bring the tactical capability and the baseline capability that any law enforcement officer with a firearm responding to a potential deadly situation would bring, but they also bring different areas of expertise. So for example, the ATF, obviously, if this turns out to be some incident involving a firearm, they're going to be critical in doing that type of research to figure out where the firearm came from, what type of weaponry might be involved in a situation if it turns out that there is actually a shooting here. And again, you have other resources from the federal government, from state, local law enforcement. And then one thing that also, we also have to keep in mind, which I don't think get enough attention in these situations, and that is the emergency medical personnel who are so critical to the training that goes into preparing for responding to these incidents, all the way down to hospitals in the vicinity. We're looking at the location now where there's some type of report of an incident, but at hospitals throughout this location, miles and miles around, they're getting the alert now that there's some type of situation. And as you and I speak right now, they're preparing for the possible receiving of victims if that is, if that's needed. Obviously, we hope that's not the case. But this is all what we see what we don't see behind the scenes that's going on, as all of these agencies and all of these institutions have trained in order to how to prepare for this type of incident. When one person, if it turns out to be, some type of shooting or some type of threat, one person can cause hundreds, even thousands of people to then, switch into high gear and try to respond in order to try to save lives. It's really a Herculean endeavor that goes in so much that we don't see on our television.